Recovery is possible.
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 Recovery dialogues and sober stories.
Welcome to another episode of Recovery Dialogues and Sober Stories, where we strive for greater awareness and understanding of addiction and co-occurring conditions. Today's episode is brought to you by the leading luxury rehab, Wish Recovery, which helps individuals reach their recovery goals daily with innovative and enhanced inpatient and outpatient treatment options. In today's episode, we explore the increasing space technology is taking in addiction and mental health care. In our ever-progressing world, technology is a beacon of hope, promising transformative change in addiction recovery and dual diagnosis treatment. It is poised to redefine our approach to these critical areas of mental health, amplifying the quality, reach, and effectiveness of treatment methodologies. Evidence-based interventions like cognitive behavior therapy and motivational interviewing have proven to be effective in treating primary substance use disorders. Technology can facilitate the use of these interventions, and innovative digital tools can unlock breakthroughs in the complex arena of dual diagnosis where mental health and substance use disorders intermingle. Technology can make addiction recovery accessible, regardless of geographical location or logistical hurdles. It can weave itself into the fabric of treatment and recovery support systems, providing dynamic, real-time progress monitoring, guiding recovery decisions, and offering lifelong support. The potential of technology to revolutionize dual diagnosis treatment is immense. Strategic initiatives can enhance the quality of services for those battling dual diagnosis, reinventing the delivery of therapy and bolstering the capacities of our systems. Technology can streamline care, fostering greater coordination and integration, translating into more comprehensive and effective outcomes. Wearable technology like smartwatches and fitness bands can monitor health parameters, empower individuals to track their progress, and tailor their recovery plans. With AI and machine learning, we can delve deeper into data, predicting relapses and identifying patterns that may elude human therapists, thereby enhancing the success rate of recovery. Virtual support communities, recovery apps, and wearable devices are becoming cornerstones of the recovery process, offering support, fostering self-awareness, and providing tools for self-improvement. Virtual reality and AR technology are opening new doors in physical and psychological therapy, enabling individuals to master coping mechanisms in a controlled setting. In essence, technology has carved a new path in the landscape of addiction recovery, enriching it with advanced tools and resources. By harnessing the transformative power of these technologies, we can empower individuals on their recovery journey, fostering long-term success and a brighter, healthier future. Today's guest is Angela Phillips, a seasoned professional with over a decade of experience in mental health and recovery. She has worked as a therapist, clinical director, and content creator, focusing on mental health and recovery. Angela has worked in various institutions, including private practices, government agencies, hospitals, and academic institutions. She is known for her innovative digital therapeutic tools and programs covering health, wellness, recovery, and nutrition. Her personal life gives her empathy and understanding, and she aims to provide families with the necessary knowledge and skills for recovery. Angela has developed effective treatment methods for psychiatric disorders like depression, anxiety, and addiction. Welcome to the show, Angela. Let's dive in. How has technology impacted addiction or mental health recovery, and what advancements have been made recently?
What a great question. Wow, there are so many advancements and it's just so much more availability that's come up in relation to addiction and mental health recovery recently. And in particular, where I overlap a lot is the digital therapeutic space. So there have been a lot of apps that have been developed, just generally speaking, right? And that can be for a variety of reasons. But on the digital therapeutic spectrum, this is really going to be something that is evidence-based or that's working toward being an evidence-based sort of treatment that can supplement something someone else is doing or just provide additional support. And so that looks like potentially AI-driven cognitive behavioral therapy. It could be exposure therapy through virtual reality. And that's for a variety of sort of illnesses or symptoms related to potentially addiction or phobias. And then, of course, like I already mentioned, we have so many just potential resources from the variety of apps that have developed. And I think what's been really cool to see over the past few years, particularly when I've been in this space, is really how much that has transformed. And the ones that dropped during the pandemic and really maybe didn't see as much support or didn't really keep up with the changing landscape, how those kind of fell to the wayside. And the ones that folks really gravitated towards that were really user-friendly and had a lot of support and really those features that they wanted have continued to be really well utilized. So that's really a lot of exciting sort of advancements that are being made. Additionally, there's really early intervention and monitoring tools. So we know a lot about like our physiological response during recovery, whether it's mental health or addiction related. And so we're able to look at things like sleep patterns, our heart rate or heart rate variability, our physical activity, all of these things that we really didn't have a whole lot of ways to tap into without more of a formalized program. And now we can really use our smartphones and just a lot of different other wearable technology, our watches, things like that. And then, of course, along with these apps and just the internet in general, we've got online support communities and just a whole other slew of resources that are now available in that format.
What are the benefits of incorporating technology into the recovery process, and how does it enhance overall well-being?
There are so many potential benefits to incorporating technology into the recovery process. The biggest one to me is accessibility, because I've worked with so many folks, particularly in digital health and the teletherapy or telehealth space, that just couldn't get to a space where they could engage in the therapeutic process, be it in an individual therapy session with a therapist one-on-one, in group therapy. All of these things are so difficult for folks to manage their time around. So that's been one aspect of the accessibility. The other piece is the affordability of it. It's so much, obviously, less expensive if someone's able to manage or support their mental or behavioral health through an app that's free to download, right? But certainly you're able to get so many more benefits from different wellness tools, particularly offered through technology now, that you would never have been able to get previously, that are now becoming more and more cost effective. Obviously, it's way more convenient. Technology lives in our pockets now. And we really have easy access to recovery-related content and other support. It reduces a lot of these barriers, again, around transportation or scheduling, but also the cost factors. And if we live in a rural environment, now we can have access to a lot of those tools, but just so much more is available. Also, a lot of the folks that we work with really struggle after hours, right? So it's really great that a lot of this is available 24/7. We also work a lot with AI, and we have a great bot that we've always built into whatever systems that we're working with. And although that comes with its own risks, it also can be super helpful and supportive. We've just really seen a lot of additional resource and confidence building and skill building come from new tools and technology like that. Additionally, there's a lot of self-help and education, and there are just so many different components out there right now. So I think as technology advances and we through the, I wouldn't call it good and bad, but what may stick around and what may fall to the wayside, we've got a great opportunity to really develop out stellar tools that are going to be evidence-based and really show what works and what doesn't for folks.
Can you share examples of innovative applications or tools that have effectively supported individuals in their recovery?
Absolutely. I've had the opportunity of working with a few digital tools or innovative apps that have really developed out in the past few years, particularly as it relates to both mental health and addiction recovery. But we've also done a lot of market research with our patients and alumni of our facilities. And I consistently see a lot of the same sort of feedback or requests when we go to make sure that we're either targeting what folks need now or what we think may be evolving over time. Again, a great example, I just go back to this a lot, is everyone has pretty much heard of the app Calm. It's a household name at this point. They have built such a name for themselves and have really created such a great space for health and wellness and really focusing on mindfulness, meditation, stress management, sleep issues, reducing anxiety. There's just so much there. And they've, again, marketed it in such a way that I think it appeals to so many of the masses. So I think that's one great example, whether I think just regardless of who you are, whether you're struggling with mental or behavioral health recovery or if you're not, it's a great application. I personally have worked with Talkspace, which particularly when I first started working with them, there really wasn't much of anything like Talkspace on the market to that degree. And so that was really amazing to be a part of, just getting that access for folks, not only in the live telehealth sessions, but also in doing the asynchronous messaging so that it was really way more convenient. It offered anonymity, which a lot of these applications do as well. And it was able to give them access to someone at a way more affordable price than another resource out there, having to organize a schedule and go in when you're barely making ends meet and trying to get to and from work and managing family and other responsibilities. Let's see, other resources would be Sober Buddy, Sober Grid, a lot of those apps that I guess have really stuck through the time that folks have had to really scrutinize and get to what's going to stick around post-pandemic, because it was a huge hit, as I am sure that when folks really relied on that connection, that community, that whether it's an AA or NA or smart groups or being able to just socialize with individuals that are going through something similar or even sponsors, things like that, to then have some sort of access again, although it wasn't the same and it's not the same. It's really opened up a whole new world to folks who can actually now access and again have this right in their pocket. And there's so many other applications. We Connect is fantastic, Mood Fit, the AA Big Book and more. And then of course other apps like Headspace, BetterHelp, Dailyo. I am also a huge proponent of journaling. So there are so many apps that really do a great job at allowing folks to customize and save. And then, of course, we have our own internal app with our organization that we've really repurposed. And we are so excited to offer as a digital therapeutic moving forward to folks that come in and do recovery, particularly with us. And then they are able to really have access to a lot of these tools, both during their treatment with us and then when they go back into the community. So it's very exciting.
What are the potential challenges or drawbacks of using technology in addiction or mental health recovery, and how can they be addressed?
Great question. So just like anything else, and particularly related to technology, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be drawbacks, and it's not going to work for everyone. So there are always those sort of blanket caveats, right? But what I would say are going to be some of the top challenges are just the learning curve for technologies. For example, I work with a lot of older folks and have for a long time, so the aging population, and even those that aren't older, right? It's sometimes a generational or a situation where someone just doesn't want to use technology. They don't want to use applications. They prefer paper pencil, or it's just they don't want to learn something totally new, and that's completely up to them. So there's always going to be that learning curve or that group that may not yet want to incorporate that in. But the more decades that we have behind us where technology is really just integrated, the more that will become more of the norm. So that obviously can be a huge challenge initially. We are constantly talking about privacy and security, just like we've seen with data breaches, with banks and things like that, right? It can be any app where you're sharing any sort of PHI or personal information. That's why it's just so important that we have great security and privacy regulations and that everyone's adhering to those standards. And the more we can work with standardizing everything and making sure that digital therapeutics have this really high quality, high standards for privacy and data security, the more comfortable everyone's going to feel. And again, that's just so important. And then also allowing users to opt out of data sharing and things like that. That's really taken a lot of change over the past few years as well. It used to be that you were inadvertently opted in and you had to opt out. Now it's more, I think a lot of folks are looking at this from the angle of let's just allow people as they go into our applications to have to opt in. That way it's not the assumption there, because there's a lot going on when you're just first learning how to use an application or you're struggling with something else, which is why you're reaching out for help. So that confusion can be really challenging. Of course, we want something to be reliable. We want it to be accurate. And a lot of apps out there mentioned evidence-based. So that's something that's really been, as much as possible, researched well. And all apps are not created equally. So we want to make sure that the delivery of that, the user experience of that, all of those things that can go wrong potentially with something that's digital or even in person, that's really standardized, that the kinks are worked out, there aren't any bugs to the best of our abilities, that there is a high standard for that as well. So we want to make sure that folks are really looking at rigorously tested and validated solutions. And then, of course, a lot of the time when we talk about addiction and recovery, a big challenge that we're addressing with people is addiction, right? And that comes in all forms, including technology. So as a huge part of our program and a lot of what I work with folks on as well is making sure to establish really clear boundaries with the technology that we're using, and that a part of what we're building in is being away from the screen and going out in nature and really making sure that we're connecting with, what's around us in the world with other people, and we're not overly relying on sort of the new digital approaches like technology, social media, gaming, contingency management through other avenues of promotion through applications, particularly as it relates to addiction recovery, to all of those things. And then, of course, a lack of oversight. So this is why we need regulation, and we need regulatory bodies to really help us figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, and hold folks accountable, because it isn't one size fits all, right? We want to make sure that we aren't putting a blanket sort of application or applying a full app to a whole population or a whole group of people, and really the potential effects that it could have. And then finally, just a lot around the affordability, the accessibility. It's not free to create a lot of this and to keep it up, but we do need to really work with government funding and grants and just really take more and put more thought into the accountability that we should have as larger organizations, companies, and as a society as to what we want to put funding in and allow us to offer that now that the healthcare landscape has really shifted a lot into digital technology. And so that's something where we really have to work a lot with policy and make sure that we have people who are advocating for all of these things, right?
How do virtual support groups and online therapy platforms provide a sense of community and connection for those in recovery, especially in situations where in-person meetings aren't possible?
This is another great question. Just as we talked about with the app platforms and other just digital technology related tools out there, it creates that access for people where you're not going to find that anywhere else. If you don't have to leave your own home, it's so much more easily accessible for those who either physically can't leave their home or don't have the time. Maybe someone's got a lot of kids or they have a lot of responsibilities or they work from home and they've just got a lot going on, which is so many of us. We still deserve that support and we still need that support. And so it's so important that we have those tools now So accessibility is huge. Also, you may live in a small community or a very specific type of community where you may not see as much diversity, or you may want to connect with others that aren't in your local community because you are worried about what others will think, or you may just not have the resources in that small community because of its size and maybe lack of awareness in that community or lack of presence of recovery groups or meetings or what have you. Digital technology can really open up a lot of those resources to folks who wouldn't have access otherwise and wouldn't have access to that diverse setting or the diverse sort of folks or potential issues that people might be bringing to the table that otherwise they wouldn't have access to if not given the ability to connect with these more broad and wide range tools or resources or communities. The other role that I think virtual support groups and things like that can play is really giving consistency to what we need or what we know folks need that are going through recovery. And so one of the big pieces is really focusing on getting a routine, getting a schedule, being consistent with it, right? And so to have the ability to access so many different types of groups all over the state, the nation, the world really gives us more and more opportunity to build that into our daily lives and our routine, which then is just a constant feeder into what we need in order to create and continue being consistent and holding ourselves accountable and connecting with others and having cheerleaders out there, folks who will continue to support us. The other big piece is really being able to find niche groups that folks really end up, I think, looking for and a lot of times are deterred from groups because of. If someone were to be referred to more of a general or broad, maybe recovery group, or I know I've worked with a lot of folks in different mental health and wellness sort of spaces, and there are a lot of support groups out there, but there aren't many that will potentially really focus on something that's more specific. So I have seen communities just blossom and grow out of one person saying, you know what, I know I'm not the only person out there experiencing this. Let me see if I put myself out there, if I put my story out there, maybe others will feel confident and comfortable in being able to come forward and connect with me. And certainly that's happened and that's grown those really specialized groups. And then finally, when it comes to accountability, I think, again, this goes back to being able to have that flexibility, build it into your routine, but it also gives us so many other points of contact and folks who are sharing their experiences. And in turn, that really gives us more of an intrinsic motivation to take these external sort of community outreach connections and say, I'm not just seeing this in my community or in a community that I've reached out to, I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm seeing it in all of these specialized areas or wherever we're making these connections. And so it just really, again, gives the ability to grow and see how we can use these digital platforms outside of just our very immediate and local, what we would have had access to if we were only looking at doing something in person and all the challenges that brings along as well.
What is the role of social media in building supportive communities for those in recovery? And what precautions should individuals take when engaging with online recovery groups?
Social media has a huge role and there's so much responsibility there. And there are, I think, just so many things to consider and think about. So we've got so many benefits potentially for social media, right? It's everything from connecting us with peers and others, the reduction potentially of the stigma that surrounds what we're going through and what might keep us from these resources otherwise. It gives us really easy access. Availability is anytime and all the time, which can be overwhelming in a lot of ways, but also nothing like it ever existed prior to when technology has really blossomed and bloomed, in the sense that our struggles and when we're in recovery and really coming up against challenges, they don't sleep at night, right? That keeps us up at night. And that's something that we need this constant potential connection to, which technology, particularly social media, can give us access to. It can give us connections with others who we may feel inspired or motivated by, but then also give us a sense of purpose and meaning when we're able to offer the same to our community. And then finally, I love that social media can also really help motivate and shed light on advocacy and awareness. It really puts a lot more tools in our hands when it comes to advocating for the issues that we've experienced or that we've seen others, raise that awareness, promote change, and promote and support others who are doing the same, because we do have this really big sense of not being alone and not wanting to feel isolated when we realize that we can get out of our own heads and out of our own way and connect with others. And because that is such a big piece and big component of the recovery communities that most of us have probably been a part of. And then certainly, just like anything else, there are absolutely precautions for engaging in this. You have a lot of times the desire to want to share more and inspire others and get your story out there. And that can be a huge catharsis and release and meaningful connection with others. But we have to be really careful about protecting our privacy. We want to also make sure that what we're using or what we're tapping into in terms of social media is legitimate and that it's verifiable. But also, we don't want to put blind trust into others. And so just because someone claims to be this kind of person or is promoting really great content, or we hear that someone's learned a lot about what they're struggling with and how to label that, things like that. When you're not working directly with a medical provider that's very well trained or someone that you know that you can really trust, that can be very tricky. And I would just urge folks again to just make sure that you verify facts and that you consult with your trusted resources when you're seeking advice or information about things like diagnoses or treatment, things like that. Because that's something that can also really set us back if we start identifying with something very strongly that may or may not be our experience, or it might be similar, but just not to take it at face value and not to take it as something that would be, potentially everything that we want to identify with, and not really considering those sources and those resources. The other thing that can come up is that because everyone's situation and story are different, we've got a lot of potentially triggering content or discussions on social media that can come up. And I always encourage folks to do social media cleanse every once in a while and really go through and think about, who am I following? What am I looking at? How is this content serving me? And how much time am I spending on this? We really want to create solid boundaries and choose your community wisely. They're not all going to be supportive and respectful. Although we might find that certain content has been great, if it's really causing more sort of stress or more challenges than help, then we might want to reconsider how we're engaging with that content. And then certainly there is always that potential for wanting to compare ourselves to other people, which we know already just in the real world outside of social media, and a lot of what we might see there that looks like the real world, right? And some of it certainly is, but a lot of that is folks putting something out there that's not the day-to-day. It's carefully curated content, right? We all contribute towards that. We're not putting the most difficult day out there. We're putting how we made it through that most difficult day or experience. So that can be really difficult when we're wired to compare ourselves to others. So we want to be really careful, because our journey will be unique and our progress isn't always going to be that linear approach. I think everyone can just learn and grow from a lot of these sort of standardized approaches that we take to social media, but also how helpful it potentially can be.
How can wearable devices and digital monitoring tools help individuals track their progress and maintain accountability in their recovery?
I love the question around wearable devices, because I actually worked a bit in biomarkers and really wanting to find different ways to track progress that we're making or to track improvements. And this area of mental and behavioral health research has grown so much in, I would say, even the last 5 years. Depending on what we're struggling with and what our goals are, we know that wearable devices can really play a helpful and significant role in addiction recovery, primarily by tracking progress and then maintaining accountability. And devices from our smartphones and watches to other wearables that measure things like heart rate variability or monitor abstinence, particularly substance use or gambling. There are sensors that can detect certain movements related to our drug use. There's other biometric data that we can gather that bases any physiological parameters, like, again, our heart rate. We've mentioned sleep patterns, stress levels. So any of those changes that might indicate there's some sort of emotional or physical distress, this can really serve as sort of early warning signs for things like relapse or something that might be a precursor to what we know might turn into a lapse or relapse. And also, again, depending on what our goals are, we can track our activity. Like wearable fitness trackers are extremely popular and they're becoming more and more affordable. These can monitor physical activity, which we know is associated with improved mental health. We know it's also associated with a reduction in things like cravings. And so just doing something simple like achieving our daily step goals or targeting specific aspects of exercise, that can really boost our motivation and our self-esteem and our feelings of accomplishment. We know that biofeedback is getting a lot of sort of notoriety and a lot more in terms of support that we can offer to really allow individuals to manage stress and anxiety and give us feedback in real time about what we might want to implement to reduce our stress levels or sort of other triggers that might come up before we potentially might have a lapse or a relapse. And so that could be, for example, providing guided breathing exercises or sort of other types of activities that we can implement in real time when we see that biological feedback coming in. And again, as we talked about, not only sleep quantity, but sleep quality is another big one that we're looking at. So it's really crucial for mental health and addiction recovery. And so they can really, using these wearables can provide a lot more insight into these patterns, suggest improvements for better sleep hygiene, because we know that has such a big impact on just our overall health and well-being, and that certainly bleeds into a lot of the potential triggers or things that might come up as a precursor to a lapse or relapse or any of the other challenges we might be experiencing. Other aspects of wearables that can be a big support are, again, just goal setting and achieving those goals, creating more of a routine and accountability. And then also what I think is super cool about a lot of sort of the newer, more community-based ones are really being able to engage with peers and connect with others that are also in recovery or friends and family. And that can really help us build more of that accountability. But also, if we like to engage in a competitive spirit, it's something that can be really helpful to just keep us moving forward, keep us on track with our goals, and get more of a slight nudge in the right direction when we might find ourselves otherwise falling off the wagon.
Are there ethical or privacy concerns related to the use of technology in addiction recovery? And how can individuals navigate these issues?
Yeah, there are absolutely ethical and privacy concerns in addiction and mental health technology, especially as these tools just increasingly become more integrated into treatments and recovery and just our daily lives. A lot of them collect really personal, sensitive information, including a lot of details about someone's history, be it their personal experience, their medical history. So really ensuring that is private and secure is extremely critical. So to help navigate that, what I would encourage is just looking for apps and services that really have robust data encryption, that are really clear about their privacy policies, and that are compliant with regulatory bodies like healthcare data in the United States is covered under HIPAA. And then for, in particular, those who are struggling with substance use and recovery, there are even higher levels of requirements and regulations, really making sure that's something. And then also that we understand how our data is going to be used. So a lot of that is something that they are required to tell us as users of their platforms. And so making sure that you're actually reading that and understanding it is very critical. And the other thing is that you're giving your informed consent. So as a user of an application or a platform, I should have a really clear understanding of how my data is going to be used. And I really need to be requested to provide informed consent for data collection and sharing. So again, read those terms and conditions and privacy policies and be cautious about granting overly excessive permissions or sharing sensitive information. And whenever there are pop-ups or there are checkboxes, things like that, make sure that you're really going through those. You're not just Obviously, we're excitedly getting on platforms and we really want to get to that aspect where we're making those connections, but it'll be well worth your time if you're really researching and reading everything that you're allowing access to. Obviously, when we're giving permission for those to use our data, they potentially can own that data and they control how it's used. Again, you want to look for apps and platforms that provide users with their own control over their data, your ability to delete or export your information. And again, you're really learning and understanding the terms and conditions to those policies. There's always going to be a potential for exploitation, and that folks may prioritize profits and their own sort of benefit over the well-being of their users. So again, make sure you're educating yourself about those platforms that you're using, and that there are certainly vulnerable populations that are using these platforms. When we're in the throes of a really challenging and difficult time, we may not have the insight that we would if we were doing really well. A lot of these organizations have certainly people behind them, but at the end of the day, they are companies and they're managed by bodies of individuals, and they need to make profits in order to be able to provide services. It's really up to us to be informed about everything that we can, from our healthcare treatment options to the services that we're receiving on digital platforms like this. And then finally, I'll just say, not all of us have equal access to technology, even though we may all have a similar phone or similar sort of resources when it comes to technology or affordability of these devices or access to the internet. So we just want to make sure that as a way to navigate that we're providing increased awareness about resources and tools that can support others in relation to maybe what we're experiencing too, that can also give accessibility to all people, including the underserved communities that we know are out there. And that takes some effort. So as we are able, building more awareness around these issues is really important, in my opinion.
In what ways can telehealth services assist in addressing disparities in healthcare access for individuals residing in remote or underserved regions? Additionally, do you believe some healthcare providers or clients excessively rely on telehealth services even when in-person treatment services are easily accessible and available?
Great question about telehealth being able to play a crucial role in addressing disparities in underserved communities. So certainly it can improve healthcare access and reduce barriers to care. And of course, the benefit to that is that individuals in areas where access may not be readily available locally, like mental health specialists or addiction treatment or certain specializations when it comes to what someone's struggling with, it can be really valuable, particularly for continuity of care, for follow-up appointments, for consultations, for folks who may be looking for more of an expert in kind of a niche area, or for managing more chronic conditions with the reduction of a need to travel or spend a particular amount of resources on being able to engage or go to appointments, things like that. Of course, it reduces that need for, or the issue around barriers to having access to transportation, things like that. Of course, our geographical location can a lot of times allow us access to certain treatments when it comes to something we might need in person. Those in-person services are still going to be really essential for certain types of treatments, like medication-assisted treatments for those who are in substance use recovery, things like that. But it can help to bridge these gaps by connecting individuals with healthcare providers, regardless of their location. And again, to also bridge the gaps around the continuity of care after we're going to those really pivotal and important appointments in person. We can continue that care and manage those conditions through telehealth and other services that might not necessarily need to be in person. Also, it can expand the amount of services that we have access to. So certainly when we see professionals, they're going to help us to identify, okay, here's what you need to focus on first that is going to really need to be addressed in order for you to move on and focus on other things that we know you've experienced that are impacting other potential medical issues. But we know we really need to address them in this particular order or with this particular issue first. Otherwise, we can't really get at solutions to other issues that might be coming up. And it can also help to assess if there's any sort of additional support that's needed based on language or cultural changes or differences from the prevailing community that's around us. So certainly if we don't speak the primary language of those that are in our community, we're going to have a really difficult time accessing the proper treatment, being able to communicate with our treatment providers so it can allow for access in that manner, in that regard. And then also if we feel like our cultural differences or how we identify isn't really understood by those in our community, then we may really feel more comfortable reaching out to someone that may only be accessible in these other ways. So while telehealth offers these really great benefits, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Our digital healthcare solutions aren't going to meet all those needs. And so certainly, as I had previously mentioned, medical conditions and other available resources might be really important to address in person. And it's also very possible that communities become overly reliant on telehealth. So we really want to make sure that, again, we're looking at what our needs are. And a lot of times I really emphasize the need for individuals having that unbiased person that can help us tease apart whether or not it is an appropriate format or platform for us to use versus the need to actually see someone in person or to seek out those connections in person, because we also may be creating more of an avoidance or a gap in our own well-being and treatment moving forward if we aren't seeking things out in person that may be more appropriate to address what we're currently challenged with. Again, I would just really encourage folks to think about that and think about why they're continuing to use services in a certain format, particularly digital health, and aren't regaining or getting more insight around a different lens if that may be more appropriate, particularly if they're feeling stuck with the resources that they are currently utilizing.
Lastly, what is the future of technology in addiction and mental health recovery? And how can we maximize its potential to support individuals on their path to sobriety and emotional well-being?
So I think the future of technology in addiction and mental health recovery really has the potential for a tremendous amount of improvement in access, effectiveness, and really personalization of not only treatment, but also support and just overall resources. And so what I'm seeing in terms of personalized interventions is that technology is really just going to continue to hone in on what an individual's unique needs are and what their preferences may be, and really getting a better sense of what progress is going to look like for each individual person based on so many multi-factor components. And so I think in order to maximize the potential of personalized interventions, that we really need to actively engage with technology tools. And although we did talk about the promises and challenges of data collection, this is where a lot of that data and that research is going to come into play and show us whether or not these sorts of personalized interventions are going to work. So we really can take it upon ourselves to give active feedback and communicate with our healthcare providers and really any of the digital technology tools that we're interacting or engaging with. The more feedback and the more information that we can give when we know that it's to the best of our ability being used for the purposes that we would want to see, the better that the outcomes can be of really refining and honing in on what those tools can look like for not only ourselves, but for others in the future. When it comes to digital therapeutics, which is what I do a lot of work in, act-based cognitive behavioral therapy or virtual reality interventions or other sorts of therapeutic interventions, the more that we engage with these products and the more that we help refine and grow them, the more we can say that they're evidence-based and the more that we can show data that supports the improvement of what symptoms we're trying to target or whatever it is that a goal that someone's trying to reach when it comes to utilizing those digital therapeutics. So really encouraging to look at how we can explore and use these under the guidance of healthcare professionals and then integrate them into treatment plans. So it's going to be, again, really up to researchers that are designing programs and ways to collect and analyze that data, but it's up to us as the individuals who are utilizing those programs to then honestly share how we're experiencing them and how we're progressing with them, be it progress in a specific trend. But I think overall, as long as we're being honest about how we're doing as we're using those products to our best ability, the more that these data scientists or researchers or therapists are able to really understand if their interventions are being effective or not. And then certainly, as we've talked about, we have so much technology like wearables and sensors that are only going to continue to expand and grow and become better and better at detecting potential triggers that then lead to other outcomes that are unwanted. And so we really want to get more and more accessibility, more and more data and research under our belts that show us what's going to be helpful for individuals now and in the future.
Thank you, Angela, for your time, insights, and expertise. This concludes our episode. I am very thankful for the continuous support of our sponsor, Wish Recovery. It is a luxury dual diagnosis treatment center committed to providing exceptional care for those seeking recovery. To stay informed and never miss an episode, subscribe to Recovery Dialogues and Sober Stories on your preferred podcast platform. Our commitment to engaging discussions and stories of triumph over challenges of substance use and co-occurring disorders remains steadfast. Together, we can build a community of support and understanding. So stay tuned for more from Recovery Dialogues and Sober Stories.
Recovery is possible. Recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery dialogues and sober stories.